How did you come to have this drawing?
My brother was a print kind of book dealer and he'd bought it. I don't know where, I think possibly London, but he always kept it. He didn't sell it and then he died and it got...
Henry Ryland was one of the last serious draftsmen of the late Victorian aesthetic movement. He trained at the Académie Julian in Paris in the 1880s, then exhibited at the Royal Watercolour Society for most of his career. Drawings like Jasmine, the appraiser is right to note, are scarce on the market. Most of his finished sheets are watercolours.
Henry Ryland is considered to be one of the foremost artists of the neoclassical revival, which came after the pre-Raphaelite period. And Henry Ryland was a particularly fine artist in the medium of watercolour and considered to be one of the best exponents of that medium. But this is a pencil drawing, and what strikes you when you look at it is the level of meticulous detail in the modelling and the drapery and the beautiful face, which he has captured so softly and so...
The auction comparable the appraiser mentions matters. The market for Ryland pencil drawings, once treated as minor relative to his watercolours, has climbed steadily over the last decade as collectors have come round to the studies. A £30,000 figure for a sheet of paper would have sounded extraordinary 15 years ago.
There was a drawing of a very similar model, it might have been the same model, that came up for auction only a few months ago. And I would say that your drawing was equal, if not more, beautiful. Okay. I think if that example is anything to go by, this could easily fetch in the region of £30,000.
Oh, gosh, right.
She's just gorgeous.
Yes, thank you very much.
Ryland died in 1910 at the age of 54. His neoclassical watercolours sit in private hands and a handful of regional museum collections. Jasmine, by surviving in graphite, gives us something the finished works don't, the moment before the colour went on, when the woman in the picture was still only a face and a fall of fabric.
Tell me about your connection with this picture.
Well, I'm Ralph Hedley's great-grandson.
Ralph Hedley spent his whole career in Newcastle, and his subject was always Tyneside. The Lang Art Gallery in Newcastle holds his best-known canvas, Geordie Hard the Bairn, and a substantial group of others. He died in 1913, and his market has climbed quietly but steadily since the Lang's later retrospectives reintroduced him to a national audience.
The composition tells the story.
Yes.
It's all about composition. Where do you start? In a way, well, of course, you start in most pictures in the foreground. And where does it lead your eye? It leads your eye down here to this anonymous heap. What is that heap? Of course, that is the clay. And that clay has actually been sitting there probably for a year. And then it leads you back down the wheelbarrow track. And where does the clay go? It goes into this machine. So as you say, I haven't done a quick course in brickmaking as well with this picture. And then they fill out the bricks, and it seems to me that they squeeze out the water and it comes down this channel.
What makes this picture rare in Hedley's output is the subject. His working-class scenes are usually mines, shipyards, or fish quays. Brickyards appear in only a handful of his recorded canvases. The composition the appraiser is reading is closer to Whistler than to documentary realism. Every line in the picture drives the eye to the woman placing the bricks.
It's very interesting you should bring the two, because this is what art is all about. Value. What did you say it cost you? I can't remember.
£50.
£50, 1971.
1971, yeah.
Not bad. I think a fair value is £35,000, £40,000.
Wow.
£50 in 1971 is roughly £900 in today's money. £40,000 means this painting has outperformed the price of an average house in the northeast over the same 53 years, and it sat on a wall for the entire run. This video is brought to you by Velco, the Antique Identifier app. Snap a photo of any item and Velco gives you an instant identification and a value estimate from its database of millions of antiques and collectibles. Available free on the App Store and Google Play. Now back to the appraisals.
They brought along today is by Walter Osborne. a very interesting artist, an Irishman born in Dublin, and he painted in a very modern way, really. And this one, painted in 1901, is done in a most beautiful, very liquid way. He's brought the brush very quickly across the surface of the canvas too. So
Walter Osborne was the most influential Irish impressionist of his generation. Born in Dublin in 1859, he trained at the Royal Hibernian Academy and then at the Antwerp Academy, where the painting studio was run by Charles Verlat. He went on to paint in Brittany in the early 1880s, absorbing the plein air manner you can see in the brushwork here. The National Gallery of Ireland holds the bulk of his finest work.
Well, I mean, I'm very thrilled you did bring it, because I think it is one of the nicest things I've seen today, perhaps the nicest, which is quite a thrill. Now, Walter Osborne died young, and he was an extremely popular man in Dublin, and he was a good teacher too, so there were many pupils and friends who mourned his passing. He died suddenly of pneumonia in 1903, and that's 2 years after this picture was painted in 1901. His work is really popular now. The value of the picture is quite a surprise, actually. I believe it to be between £40,000 and £60,000.
My goodness.
I've had to bring it down from where I started, which was possibly 60 to 80, simply because it being an oil sketch and quite late, I thought maybe I ought to be a little bit cautious. But I can see this picture, because it's so attractive, driving its price up to more than 80,000. It's a possibility.
The sitter's mother, Cecil Frances Alexander, wrote all things bright and beautiful and once in Royal David City. Her father, William Alexander, was Archbishop of Armagh, Primate of all Ireland. Osborne died of pneumonia 2 years after he painted this portrait, at 43 years old, at the height of his powers and just before the Irish market for his work would have made him a wealthy man. Petrus van Schendel was a Dutch painter who built his entire career on a single subject, market scenes lit by candles, lanterns, and bonfires. He worked between the Netherlands and Belgium and settled mostly in Brussels from the 1840s onward. His command of artificial light was so distinctive that contemporaries nicknamed him Schendel der Nacht, Schendel of the Night. The Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam holds important examples of his work.
Has it been in your family for some time?
It was in my husband's family.
Right.
And I think his father bought it many years ago.
Was there any particular significance to the subject, do you think, for your father-in-law when he bought it?
Well, he worked in the fish market as a young boy.
Did he?
And his father was in the fish market before him. And so I imagine that because it's a market scene, that's what appealed to him.
Absolutely.
But I don't know, really.
But also the fact that it's on the quayside.
The market for 19th century Dutch painting has been heating up for 15 years, driven by new collectors entering the field around 2010. Van Schendel, because his pictures look unlike anyone else's working in the period, has been one of the largest beneficiaries. A £100,000 insurance figure is on the conservative side. Large signed examples have crossed £200,000 at international auction within the last decade.
To reveal all, down at the bottom, is the signature here.
Yes.
P. van Schendel.
Yes.
Petrus van Schendel. A Dutch painter, but he worked in Belgium and Holland, and he absolutely specialised in these moonlit, candlelit scenes. It was his trademark, if you like. It was what he was absolutely brilliant at. And he was working in the middle of the 19th century, between about 1830 and 1870 was when he was really in his prime, painted in oil on this very nice bit of wood. Well, just quality is the word for it. It is by probably the leading candlelight painter of the 19th century.
That I didn't know. I did see some of Van Schendel's paintings in New York.
Yes.
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Or perhaps 5 years ago.
Yeah. No. Well, his work does come up quite regularly at auction, so we know reasonably clearly what this probably would make. I think at auction he's very much in vogue. He's very much sought after. A lot of people collect him. probably make between 70 and 90,000 pounds. So you should probably insure it for 100,000 pounds.
Wow. Thank you.
Almost like winning the lottery.
My brother-in-law is French, and his first cousin was married to Kim, the artist. So we met them when we were first married back in 1974, and my sister said, "You really want to see his paintings, they're pretty special."
Kim Tschang-yeul was born in 1929 in what is now North Korea. He fled south during the Korean War, served in the South Korean Army, studied at Seoul National University, and moved to Paris in 1969. According to his own account, he discovered his subject by accident one morning. A wet canvas in his studio caught the light, and the droplets gave him the optical effect that would occupy him for the next 50 years.
Kim Tschang-yeul is Korean originally and was from unified Korea as it was at the time. In the north was where he was born. Sadly, he had to flee Korea during the communist regime taking hold. He actually served in the military during the Korean War, went to New York, and then eventually settled in Paris, which is where he began painting his raindrops. Now, there's a little bit of water damage to this canvas, and actually, interestingly, it was through a wet canvas in his studio that he discovered that that's what he was drawn to painting. And from 1970 onwards, just simply painting droplets of water. I believe that that's also not uncommon for the school of Korean artists that he came from. A lot of them went in for this kind of very repetitious, obsessive kind of mark making, and it's seen as being a kind of result of the trauma of the war that they experienced.
His top auction prices have come in at Christie's Hong Kong, where his large later canvases have made figures approaching £1 million. The early 1974 works, when the technique was still forming and the droplets were smaller and more deliberate, are now among the most actively collected period after the masterworks. A signed pair from 1974 is exactly what a Korean specialist sale wants on its catalogue cover.
Do you think you remember how much you paid at the time for them?
We've talked about it, and I can't imagine we paid more than about £150 each at the time.
This is exactly the kind of period that gets people particularly excited about his work. And I can say that individually, possibly the piece with the sand being worth a bit more, but they're probably worth at auction around £80,000 to £120,000 each in the current market. Upwards of that potentially, I think, for the sand piece.
Wow.
Yes.
You actually thought you were going to say 2,000.
Kim Tschang-yeul died in Seoul in January 2021 at the age of 91. The two paintings on this table, bought in 1974 for £150 each, on the strength of being kin to the artist, are now collectively worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next. And there are plenty more incredible appraisals waiting for you on the channel. Go check them out.